Welcome to Unfiltered with Sam. Today we'll be hosting Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss, a groundbreaking guest for a podcast from my region. Before we get into the interview, I'd like to ask you all if you find the content of our new channel interesting, being it's produced right here in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. Please like, subscribe, and share to help us reach more people. Your support really, really means a lot. So now off to our guest. Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss is an American Haredi rabbi and a prominent spokesperson for Neturei Karta, an anti-Zionist Jewish group. The rabbi's short bio will be found in the interview description below. You will also be able to find the link to Neturei Karta's website in the interview description. I encourage you to visit their website where all your questions about Neturei Karta will be answered. Especially look at the links of the mission statement and the question and answer links. They offer clear and concise explanations to address most common doubts. So Rabbi Weiss, welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be on your channel, and especially being that it is focused in the Middle East, and of course, with God's help, inshallah, it goes throughout the world. So it's really critical, I hope, with God's help, that it will be understood and therefore help to remedy inshallah, the quagmire, this terrible bloodshed that we are seeing, that is ongoing at this moment.
Yeah. God willing, Rabbi, inshallah. I wanted to go, though, to the current situation now unraveling in the Middle East, and to touch upon something you had touched upon earlier about Israelis who dare voice against the government. So I'm going to bring an example. For example, given the recent videos on platforms like X showing how dissenters in Israeli society face violent attacks for opposing the situation in Gaza, what do you say to those subjected to such violence for expressing their views, and how can they protect themselves? What advice do you have for them as Neturei Karta?
Yeah, well, talking about that, we again, I thank you that you mentioned our site, NKUSA, for Neturei Karta, nkusa.org, and anybody can go there. And we have a lot of pictures, thousands, I believe, of and there's links and things to how you can see demonstrations and our history from the beginning of Zionism. From 76 years ago, and even prior to that, the Jews who were living in Palestine stood up and spoke up, opposed the occupation. They said this is wrong. It's not Judaism. It's a simple nationalist occupation. We oppose it, and because they opposed it, as I showed you, first you can even see actually going back in the 1920s, the chief rabbi before the rabbi who I mentioned, Rabbi Dushinsky, his name was Rabbi Sonnenfeld, of blessed memory, met with the king of Transjordan and conveyed, and even in Arabic, they put out letters in the Arabic newspapers and so forth, saying we do not aspire to take over we are totally opposed to this. We're not Zionists. We want to live in peace under your rulership and so forth. This was the view of Jews. But that continued on, and we had major rabbis who were assassinated by the Zionists at the time. I have a picture in 1948. This rabbi, his name was Rabbi Chazan of blessed memory. He was carrying a white flag out to the Jordanian army in 1948. At the time of the war in 1948, the Jewish community living in the old city of Jerusalem said, we don't want to be with the Zionists, and they went out to take the whole community over to the Jordanians, and the Zionists shot at him, and he had a bullet. The rest of his life, he had a bullet in his leg, and they assassinated many of our rabbis. Since the state got control, the state of Israel, they were unfortunately ratified by the UN. We've had so many demonstrations, like I said, tens of thousands of Jews. But beside that, you can see that nobody speaks about Jews are brutally attacked, they're beaten. This is going on for well over 76 years. Daily, This is the army, and we're never militant. Jews don't carry guns. I'm talking about the religious Jews, the ones who are true to the Judaism. We don't carry knives. We stand on the streets. We demonstrate. We speak up. We put out books, and they get attacked, viciously attacked. This is the stink water that they spray on them to destroy the clothes and to discourage demonstration. 76 years this is going on. As I say, the brutality is beyond words. They trample them with horses. They smash their heads. They arrest them. It's beyond words what you will find, what's happening, and the world is silent. They ignore all of this. I mean, I've been demonstrating since my youth against Zionism, and we get death threats. But in Israel, being it's under the Israelis, they get murdered, they get arrested. You can see children, old rabbis. This is what's happening in the demonstrations in Palestine and the world. It's unbelievable. If this would happen once in Lebanon, if it would happen in the United States, in Canada, anywhere, once, Netanyahu would be on the first plane and yelling anti-Semitism, and they would be speaking and demanding restitution to who, by the way? To Israel, of course, restitution to Israel. If they would do anything against, and of course, it's, it would be scandalous and it would be wrong if a Jew would be beaten. But they, with impunity, they beat and arrest. Here you can see, by the way, Jewish people, there's mandatory military service in Israel to the what they call IDF. We call IOF, Israeli Defense Force. But here you see a Jewish girl. This is what's happening daily. They get arrested because they refuse to serve in their army. And here you see a girl crying and saying prayers. Note that her prison garb is an army uniform because they forcefully, as a psychological warfare, they put them into Israeli uniforms behind bars in order to break their spirit. Anyway, but this is what's happening daily. And for 76 years, we've been demonstrating. As I'm speaking here, we have tens of rabbis who are in prison. They're in prison in Israel. They talk about that, the hostages. They have thousands of Palestinian hostages in the Israeli prison, and they have Jewish people who were refusing to go along with their murder, with their assassination, with the genocide. And you have Jews who refuse to serve in their army. They're in their prisons. People who try to leave the country are caught by the borders, and they don't allow them even to escape. We have people who smuggle themselves out. They come to other Jewish communities. And if they're caught, they have deals. Even now in England, they're trying to force some Jewish rabbi to go. He's been 11 years in hiding from Israel, and he brought up a family and everything. They're trying to force them back in. So you're asking what's happening over there to the people. I could speak about the religious communities that have been always speaking up against, and they're brutally beaten, and nobody says a word. Of course, the Israeli society doesn't. They buy into the Israeli, their narrative that these people are vicious, self-hating Jews, or whatever they may say. But now it happens to be that because of what's happening in Gaza, and there's other people who have a difference of opinion about how the hostages should be released, so they're demonstrating against Netanyahu. Altogether, they consider him a scoundrel and somebody who should be behind bars. So they're saying that his whole reason why he's continuing the war is because he's trying to keep himself out of prison. I'm not going to get into all the political dirt, which there's a whole state, as far as we're concerned, is one piece of dirt, basically. So they're demonstrating, and then they get, of course, and some of them get arrested, they get beaten or whatever. But so this is an issue that I'm reluctant to get into, because I consider both sides, even though they may be right about the war, but they're wrong about waving the Israeli flags, because the core issue, the reason why the whole October 7th happened, is because they've made an occupation. They went in unlawfully. They took a people and they oppressed them. They've made an apartheid. They've stolen their land. They're killing and totally illegitimately. And the United Nations today is agreeing to that. And I like to give an example that I think it's really very important at this juncture to speak about. You have apartheid. United Nations was created for one reason. After the World War I and World War II, we see millions of people. No, never in the history that they've seen so many people that the people remember to be killed in one time. And so they decided they have to find some a solution where you could have a peaceful negotiating table where you can to adjudicate and to ratify conflicts in the world without killing. So they made the United Nations, where it would be the elite, the intelligentsia of the world will get together from every country, and they'll be able to somehow have a solution for their conflicts. One of the first things they did was ratify the creation of the State of Israel, and also they accepted, let's say, the South Africa into their body of the United Nations body. So, in other words, you had South Africa that was openly practicing apartheid for tens of years, was looked at as a legitimate, lawful country practicing something so contrary to everything that the United Nations says about the equality of humanity. Yes, and their ambassadors was always addressed as His Excellency and so forth, and their leadership was, and they could come. The president was able to address the United Nations, and if Nelson Mandela cried and spoke out against the injustice of it all, he was arrested, and he was considered a terrorist for 27 years. While the South Africa was enjoying its respect in the United Nations, he was sitting in prison with many others. So you can see that although there's a United Nations and there's a world power, and they supposedly represent what's good, they could be just doing something totally criminal and unjustified. And that the world today, if somebody would like to create a state and come to the United Nations and say, we want to create a state and it will be based on apartheid, they will be laughed out of the United Nations. And every child will say it's ridiculous. Why was it then acceptable? So you can see they could make a mistake. When they ratified the State of Israel, let us remember what we're dealing with. The majority of the country was Muslims. They were Muslims. The second largest community was Christians. The third was Jewish. Now, they ratified the creation of a state that will be called a Jewish state, the State of Israel. What you're doing is asking for bloodshed, because by doing that, you're automatically going to take a segment of the population who will be considered second-class citizens. Rightfully, wrongfully, psychologically, it's a fact. If you're going to call it a Jewish state, everybody who's not Jewish will become second-class citizens. Whether you're going to show me that the laws is the exact same or not, that's neither here nor there. It's the psychological issue. How did the United Nations come and ratify such a concept? It happens to be that, and as I say, and that would be, even if it would be a majority of the people would be Jewish, but here we're dealing with the majority were Muslim. The second was Christian, the third was a Jew. And altogether, looking at the Jewish community, as I mentioned, the Jewish community that was residing, that were living, that were the citizens of this land of Palestine were anti-Zionist. It was the Zionists who came from Europe. They were interlopers. They were people who came from another country. How did the United Nations create this, ratify a State of Israel? You look at it, you see how it could only be, it's illogical, and it's the only explanation you can give. It's that it's satanic. It's that it went beyond human comprehension. But they went and it was ratified. And from that day till today, you are finding that there's been an ongoing chain, a link of inhumanity, of occupation. Every day is worse than the day before. Think about it. The 76 years, there was the war after war, death after death, by the Intifada and all these issues. People were suffering, and not who died over there. Mostly Palestinians and many Jews also. Why did they die? For what reason? For a selfish, flawed occupation. So if you look at Zionism and the state, it is so flawed. It is so anti-Semitic. It is anti-Semitic because it took the name Judaism and it is using it as a tool to bring bloodshed to the Muslims, to the Christians, and to the Jews. And they're trying to force this down the throat of people. The people who are demonstrating against Netanyahu, they're right that Netanyahu is evil. But their waving of the flag of Israel is waving a satanic flag. They are asking to perpetrate in perpetuity an occupation that will bring more bloodshed. You may put him out of the picture, Netanyahu, but what will happen tomorrow? You will continue to oppress another people that will automatically is injustice and will bring more bloodshed and more bloodshed. It can never be resolved. The only resolution is the removal of not something that was a religion that was existing or that Jews and Muslims lived for hundreds of years together. No, it's a movement of 100-something years. It's a flawed concept, just like apartheid was a creation of a mere 100 years ago or something. This is a mere concept of somebody sitting together. Here, Theodor Herzl and his cohorts. You can see this picture of the Declaration of Independence by David Ben-Gurion. Here, it's 1948. Look at this dais. Here's the historic moment of the Declaration of Independence. Now, imagine making a Muslim state without ayatollahs, without sheikhs, without imams. They're creating a Jewish state, calling upon God, saying that it's given to us by God. And they're not even covering their head, as the Torah states that a Jew has to cover his head, so he believes that there's a God above us. They're flaunting their rejection of the Torah, and here they're making their state, in the eyes of the world, calling it a Jewish state, and declaring that we should be supported because it's godly given to us and because of the Holocaust and so on. You see the hypocrisy, the totally the falseness, duplicity of this state that it is. And if any, and here you have a picture of Theodor Herzl. He has a beard, but it's the beard of a goat. It's not a Jewish. He's not covering his head. And this is what the picture of, this is what Zionism is. It's not Judaism. It's simply a powerful, selfish, flawed nationalist movement that's using the facade of religion in order to stifle anybody who speaks up. The Secretary General of the United Nations said months ago, right after October 7th, he said, wait a second, he said, this didn't come out of a vacuum. Remember where this came out. This is because you're occupying a people. You can't expect that you'll occupy a people. He said, we're not justifying the murder of innocent people. But remember, you want to look for a solution. We're United Nations. We're looking for solutions. We're using intelligence. He said it didn't come out of a vacuum. What was the response of Israel? That he's a persona non grata. He should be removed from his office. So now the head of the human rights of the United Nations, Friedrich, I forget, I apologize for getting that, put out a report. Everybody's putting out reports. The General Assembly, everybody's stating it's you can't do what you're doing. You're murdering people. Oh, everybody's anti-Semitic. So Israel has two nuclear weapons. One, they're using God, they're using the Torah, declaring it's a Jewish state, and they're counting on the ignorance of the masses, that people don't know that Judaism means to serve God, while Zionism is a totally different issue. It's a nationalism created by sinners, by haters of God. And the second weapon is, dare you say a word against us? You know why you're saying it? Not because you are looking and hurting with the people of Palestine, not because you are looking at the injustice or the illogic of what they're doing, but because you hate Jews. How repugnant, how repulsive. But that's their nuclear weapon that they're using. And you would think that it would somehow slow down. On the contrary, it's building. How we have here, as you know, I'm in the United States, we go constantly to Columbia University, Rutgers, wherever you like, all the universities, we're out there, we're demonstrating. And the students are getting suspended. The professors are losing their tenure. They're getting fired. And they're putting on laws and putting out laws and statements in Congress that if you dare speak up against Israel, it's anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic. We just went to Washington when Mrs. Harris, the vice president, spoke, and we plead with whoever becomes president, you don't abdicate your obligation. God gave you this lofty position. How could you be silent? How could you ignore that it's totally criminal what's happening? They're murdering people. They're murdering people day in and day out. For what? Because they want to force an occupation that's basically, so I want you to understand, although I'm looking at the people who are being arrested by Israel because they're objecting to that, I want you to remember that they're silent at the 76 years of our demonstrations, day in and day out. No, people are ignoring. We have pictures you can see, and as I'm speaking, we have rabbis in prison in Israel because they're speaking out against. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody is talking about that. And even the ones that are being arrested, Israel is given a free pass, And the only reason I can understand is because the works of Satan, because it defies logic, and we dare not be silent.
You're right. We dare not be silent. That's why we're trying through channels like this one to also get the other side of the story out, which in our eyes is the truth. Thank you for that, Rabbi. I wanted to ask you something else, something that's very sensitive to the Arabs. People on social media, mostly Jews, make the claim that the Torah and Talmud they make the claim that the Torah and Talmud call for the elimination of all non-Jews or non-believers. Do Jewish teachings view Jews really as superior to others? I ask you, Rabbi Weiss, is there any basis in Jewish texts for this shocking claim? Try to make it as brief as you can, because I'd like to go through the last 3 questions with you also.
Yeah. As my teacher, Rabbi Beck of blessed memory, was a big fighter against survivors, used to always say, let's just put this on the side and understand. Look at our history. We lived together with the Muslims. We lived together in Muslim countries. If all these claims, and we were respected, and we gave respect, and we lived together in harmony, if this issue would be true, that they keep on, accusing us of, it would never have been possible for us to coexist for these hundreds and hundreds of years. So something is wrong in all these claims, and so we, on the contrary, as I will say, Judaism requires of us, the Torah teaches us constantly that we have to, mahu racham afatei racham, just as God is compassionate, you must be compassionate, to do kindness. And through the Bible, it says how Abraham, what he did with his friends and other people, and how he constantly gave food, and he stood he sat even when he was not well at the door of his tent, and he, in the heat of the day, and he brought in people and gave them to eat and to drink and so forth. And we're taught this, and we teach our children this. We're taught we're not even allowed to steal something that has the value less than a penny by us. You're not, even though you can say it doesn't have value, you're not allowed to. And we teach them. And when they do, God forbid, we take a child into a store and he takes a candy. So you'll hear, if you go to a store, you'll see where if you ever happen to cross and you'll be Jewish people, you'll hear that a mother will say to the child, "Why are you yelling? Why are you doing something? It's a chil Hashem. It's a desecration of God's name. It's stealing." Right? So that she will say, but she's not even going to use that. The first thing she'll say is, well, how could you act so bad? It's a chil Hashem, it's a desecration of God's name. Because our whole purpose of living is to sanctify God's name and to do kindness and to emulate God and so forth. It's totally contrary to what people take, and so what they do is they take they take out of context a lot of words. The Talmud is part of Judaism. Contrary to what people think, there's like this Sharia law and things like that if you're Muslim. So there's different issues. We have by Judaism, we have the written law that God gave Moses, the Torah on Mount Sinai, but everything is written very concise. So later he spoke to Moses, and it's called the oral law that was later written in the form of Mishnah. Mishnah was later formed in the form of Talmud. So Talmud is the teaching of the schools. It's massive. It's 20 volumes, and it's written all the many laws, the explanation of laws, and a lot of it is where God rebukes the Jewish people. It's explaining the verses of the prophets, or Isaiah, Ezekiel. You look at it, it's constant rebuke of the Jewish people. It's also a rebuke of the nations. It was written in Babylon, in Iraq, basically, the Talmud. And over there, it says that if you're not living in the Holy Land, you are idol, like an idol worship. Now, it was written in, the rabbis in Iraq wrote this. So you see that something is wrong. I mean, how could they write like idol worship? They're writing it themselves. So it's a lot of it. You have to take it in context, not out of context. Okay. I could get, I'm not going to get in. You can't, if you go into individual issues. But one thing is clear: we are told not to kill and not to steal. And on the contrary, we have to do kindness, visit the sick, console the bereaved. And constantly, like, to be a picture to the world of something godly, that the world should learn from that. So it's all wrong. Now, the Zionist rabbis used the Torah, just like I give an example. If you look at the tablets, the 10 Commandments, it says, I am your God. The picture of the tablets, it says, do not kill, do not steal. All you have to do is cover the words do not, and it says steal, kill. They take it out of context. So that's what we have. The rabbis are using the words of the Talmud in order to show that they have a right to do what they want with the Arabs. But what they are simply a satanic group. Their rabbis are false. They're used as a checkbook to sign off for the state of Israel to uproot the olive orchards, to kill and to steal and occupy. But they are not the true rabbis. They are not true rabbinate. It's false. We have our rabbinate. I want you to know that there's a rabbinate that exists in Israel. It's called the Eidah Charedes, God-fearing community, and we always have chief rabbis. These are in total opposition to that. So that it's a charade, it's a facade, and it's not true. All the use of the Jewish statements, it's an abuse of the Jewish statements. It's wrong. It's out of context.
Great. So it's very clear by you that there's no basis in Jewish text for these shocking claims, or for even Israeli high-ranking officials or political party leaders in Netanyahu's coalition to frequently refer to Palestinians as animals and non-humans. Thank you for the clarification.
They are worse than animals. That's all I can say. And they have no right to use the words of the Torah, because a lot of them have studied, not a lot of them, but some of them, and Netanyahu, I believe, amongst them, who are not ignorant of the words of the Torah, and they've heard our demonstrations, and they know very well that they're totally abusing and falsifying the words of the Torah. So these are worse than animals. They're criminals. It's not true what they're saying. And like I say, there are words of the Torah. You look in the Talmud, you find plenty rebuke of Jews, where there's words of parables and words that compare people to animals, compare this and that, but it's all, you have to put it into context.
Okay.
And the history is what will be the proof. In the pudding is the proof, because we lived together and we helped each other. We always did kindness. So the use of statements of the Talmud is simply malicious, criminal, and false. What they're saying is all false.
Thank you for that.